If you're going through hard times and looking for a way out, it's important to remember that life isn't an Olympic figure skating event. There are no added points for difficulty. You either stay stuck or escape. That's why you deserve to take the path of least resistance. And any voices telling you that's not allowed are not voices invested in your freedom. My name is John Oakes, and this is The Easy Way Out. How do you do something you don't want to do so that you can have a health outcome that you do want to have? Today, we're going to be talking about delayed gratification, and specifically why it's stupid, it's dumb, and I hate it. Delayed gratification is a myth, or at least a misnomer. It's a really bad idea. It's a harmful idea. It doesn't do the specific thing that it purports to do, which is delay a short-term benefit for long-term gain. It actually does the opposite. Not only does delayed gratification not work very well in the short term, it heavily impedes long-term success. Before we get into that, I just want to do some quick PSAs. It's been a big week. Had a big week on the TikToks. Had a couple semi-viral videos. One got 250,000 views. A couple others got up into the 100,000 range. The Facebook group is now at 3,400 members. And if you're brand new to that Facebook group, thank you for joining. What is the Facebook group? I don't know. We're still figuring that out. It's only about a year and a half old. It exploded in popularity. It massively outstripped what my original intended purpose was for it. And kind of ever since then, I've been baffled as to how to guide so many people all at the same time, while the Facebook algorithm makes it incredibly difficult for everyone in the group to see the things we post. So it makes it fundamentally impossible to create steady long-term interaction between teacher and student that would allow for a productive teaching relationship. So it's not a good teaching platform. It's not a good platform for sharing much of anything. So I am in the process of looking into other ways of hosting our community, other ways of delivering methods and tools that you can use to better your life and increase your chances of success with weight loss or anything else you're trying to do in life. As you can imagine, trying to manage a 3,400 person group by yourself is basically an impossible task. I find I just don't have the time anymore to answer everyone's, welcome posts there as much as I want to. I try to read all of them at least because I really want to get to know everybody. But I just don't have the bandwidth or the time to answer individual questions and offer the support I would like to offer. So I'm very interested in ways that the community can provide value to itself. And if you have ideas as to how people in the group could help everyone in the group get more out of the group, I'm all ears. And I would love to hear anything you have to say. You can email me. Well, don't email me, post in the Facebook group. And who knows, maybe the ideas that we all brainstorm, cook up together will help me figure out the exact sort of community that would be a better host for an engaging, productive weight loss community. Since this is such a new podcast, you're a pioneer listener. I thought it might be interesting for you to know how the podcast is growing. When I first started, it was very, very small, 14 downloads on the first episode or something like that. And the first few weeks, it was more or less the same, getting about, 15, 20 downloads on each episode. And then the episodes with Shay, we started to get a little bit more traction because Shay was getting her audience in on it a little bit. I was getting a little bit more proactive with sharing. And maybe I was guilty of doing that thing where I was more willing to promote someone else's story than my own content. And so after that, my last episode about emotional eating, I really kind of primed the pump for that. Got people invested in that episode before it even dropped. And man, there's just been an explosion. This last week, we've gotten 407 total downloads, taking the total downloads for the podcast up to around just under 700. and almost all the episodes now have at least 100 downloads, which is cool because like 2 days ago, no episodes were over 100 downloads. And there's quite a discrepancy between my highest episode and my lowest downloaded episode. So yeah, it would be really cool if you helped share the podcast, share it with a friend. This one today is going to be a banger. I haven't recorded it yet, but just based on my notes, I think you're going to like it. I think it's going to feel like something different and give you a fresh approach that will be hopefully more useful than what your parents and society and all the other fitness coaches have given you. And in that vein, if you could please leave a review. Last time I asked for 7, I got 1. So this time I'm going to ask for 70 so that maybe I'll get 10. So I need 70 reviews, okay? But it may sound silly, but a lot of people don't listen to a podcast if it doesn't have a certain number of reviews. And if everybody listening to this episode left a review, it would have a huge impact on the discoverability of the podcast. Anyway, enough with PSAs. Let's get into taking delayed gratification behind the woodshed. There are so many different angles that I could pursue to explain to you and show to you how impoverished a notion and how useless a notion this is. So as I go through these various areas or themes or approaches, it's not in any order of importance. They're all important. And not only are they important to this topic, they apply to so many other topics as well. Things that you've been told over and over thousands of times that this is how successful people are successful, when in a lot of cases it's not really true. And it props up the notion that certain core characteristics are super important, let alone that they exist to begin with. So let's start from that place. Why would delayed gratification be such a common way of approaching productivity or habit change? It comes down to the difference between payment and outcome. In our society, most people get a living by going to work. Nothing wrong with that. But when they go to work, the boss says, or the owner says, I need you to deliver me an outcome, and in exchange, I will pay you money. Some people are lucky enough to go to work because they truly love the work. But even those people, if there was no money involved, they might go and find a job that actually paid money that they also enjoyed. So this exchange, hey, I will show up and give you your outcome in exchange for money, is a key component of what keeps us going to jobs, especially jobs that we aren't super in love with. What if your boss came to you one day and said, hey, I need this outcome now, but I need you to delay your gratification for a year, right? You're not going to see the benefit of this work for a year. You would say, well, get lost. I'm not going to work today, give you something today that I don't get paid for until a year from now. Bosses still get people to delay gratification in a variety of incentive schemes and stuff like that. But for the most part, if you're not paying people at least once a month, and usually once every 2 weeks, and increasingly so every week, I think Amazon pays workers at their distribution centers like every day after their shift. Why? Because the more thankless a task is, the more immediate the gratification needs to be if you expect to get results. If you expect people to continue choosing to take that action. And if this is true in the aggregate, is it true on a personal level? Yes. And where does it get confusing? Because you are the boss and you are the employee. And we are taught through so many diet gurus and programs that if you just have the right action steps, you get the outcome, right? This is why you have so many guaranteed programs where they say, do this workout and eat these foods, and you're going to get the result. And it's like, yeah, in a vacuum, that will force someone to lose weight. But is it manageable? Is it sustainable? Usually it's not. That's why historically these programs are massive failures, statistically massive failures. And it keeps us in this habit of making expectations on an already stressed system without providing support. So we look at our weight and we see it as a problem to be fixed rather than the outcome of a broken system, of an overly taxed system, right? If there's flames shooting out of one end of the factory, we don't go, better turn up the speed of the conveyor belts. No, you wouldn't do that. You'd shut the factory down and say, whoa, 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 whoa. Where are things going wrong? Yet that's what we're taught to do in the service of our health, is take an already misfiring system, a malfunctioning system, or just an overstressed system, and heap more and more expectations on it and expect that to render a better outcome. So for all these reasons, delayed gratification presents a number of inconsistencies, if not outright contradictions. You tend to do things that you want to do, and if you don't want to do them, you will find ways of avoiding them. In the cases where you're doing things that you don't necessarily want to do, you have an incentive in the present moment that takes the place of the visceral enjoyment that you would have in, say, taking a hike or watching a movie with your partner, right? It's, hey, I'm going to go mow this lawn to get money because I like money and I know I'm going to be able to spend that money on watching a movie with my partner. So you can make a fairly short, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump over to that visceral enjoyment. Now, where this can work in health is for people who are already healthy. If you're already slim and looking good and you just want to keep what you already have, delayed gratification makes more sense because you're delaying, okay, I'm not going to eat 6 slices of pizza tonight. I'm just going to have 3. Why? Because I'm going to the beach tomorrow and I'm going to look hella hot. So it's totally worth it. I totally will trade 3 slices of pizza for getting to not feel bloated on the beach tomorrow. The results of your health decisions can be more immediately felt in a visceral way. But in our culture, which has such a judgmental take toward severely overweight people, it's like, well, hey, if even skinny people can do this, then you need to do it that much more. It's more important for unhealthy people to learn to delay gratification, as if you got into this place because you're just doing such an amazing job of gratifying yourself. And I think, without getting too far into it, I think we can make quite the case that severe cases of obesity are not the result of someone living a lascivious, pleasure-based lifestyle. It's usually the result of somebody living in a state of extreme lack and in desperation reaching for things that they know aren't going to fill that lack. And it's really easy for someone from the outside to say, well, gee, you're just trading pizza for bad health outcomes. So let's take Bill. And Bill wants to lose weight. He's 350 pounds. He thinks he could probably healthily weigh 180 without needing to get overly lean. Bill, like many people, has a separation in his head between the foods he likes and the foods he needs to eat in order to lose the weight. And we could have a conversation about how true that really is, blah, 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 but we don't need to get into that for today. Let's just say that Bill is going to need to eat lean proteins, vegetables, and some whole food sources of carbohydrates, rice, sweet potatoes, things like that. And he's not super jazzed about it. In fact, maybe he's been taught via decades of delayed gratification talk to despise these things. Well, how could that be? Well, think about it. If somebody says, listen, Bill, you just need to delay gratification, that means stop eating the things you like, eat the things you don't like so that you can get the thing you do want, which matches this do X to get Y formula that society has baked into all of us, which can be incredibly problematic if we're unclear about what we're actually pursuing. And so often we are. We end up doing things we don't want to do that have outcomes we don't want in order to get an outcome that we do want, not seeing that we don't want that specific outcome. We wanted the outcome that we assume comes with it. For instance, I'm going to like myself once I have lost 200 pounds. Really, you're pursuing liking yourself just as much or more than actually the weight loss. And you lose the 200 pounds and you get there and you realize, oh no, I still hate myself 100%. And you realize that, oh, I traded all that work for a delusion that I was going to like myself. Whereas I could have learned to like myself, and that could have made this process a lot less punishing. Delayed gratification, by implication, tells you that the way to get the weight off must not be gratifying. The gratification is in the result, not in the day-to-day. This matches society's voice that says, The gratification is in the outcome. Whose gratification, though? The boss's gratification. And so that begs the question of who inside of you is the boss telling you that you have to delay your gratification to give it a result that it wants. And we'll get back around to that. So Bill does things the normal way, the way we've all been taught to. And so Bill hires a coach, and the coach says, Bill, you got to learn how to delay gratification. And Bill says, how do I do that? How do I want to do something that I don't want to do? And the trainer says, well, what you got to do is get really, really clear about the future you want to see. And you got to really, really think about it. So Bill's like, okay. So he gets Bill to really visualize, right? We're visualizing, we're doing all these things that sound really good. Bill is visualizing his future self. He starts to think about it. His trainer says, when you're eating that food and it doesn't taste good, just think about skinny Bill. Just think about how nothing tastes as good as skinny feels, right? Have you ever heard that one before? And so Bill tries this. And what this forces Bill to do is create an alternate reality where Bill has an ideal outcome. It forces him to do a lot of work, A, to create that reality, and B, to focus on it in lieu of focusing on his present circumstances. This leaves Bill dissociated, unable to enjoy or taste what he's eating, and then he wonders why the food is not enjoyable. And it deepens the notion of an ideal state that we are pursuing that we do not have yet. And that everything we do, okay, I'm going to the gym. Why? Because someday I'm going to lose the weight. And so at that workout session, what are you working out for? To try to lose 200 pounds. Now, does that lend toward slow and steady wins the race? Or does that cause us incrementally to inch our way toward extremes? You know what it does, right? And then we're more likely to burn ourselves out at the gym and then be like, oh, I don't want to go to the gym. Well, why? Because you ruined the experience of going to the gym by redlining yourself on the stair climber. You ruined the experience of eating whole, healthy foods by dissociating in that moment, thinking that you have to think about a delusional and at best imagined future, and at worst an alternate reality that is fueling a delusion that you should weigh much less than you do now. And the word should is also something that our society uses to our detriment, which maybe is the topic for the next podcast. Now, I don't know if we can call Bill's idealized self a delusion, but it definitely gets close to that definition because it's an idealized future that is not here. And maybe it's not a delusion, but it's snuggled up right up against the delusion that Bill is not good enough until he reaches that ideal self, that Bill will not be able to enjoy life until he reaches that ideal self, that somehow Bill will have all the inner peace and balance required to maintain that weight long term and not just immediately go back to all the foods that he's been desperate to eat, that he's been avoiding, right? We all know how this story goes. So those are the delusions at the heart of Bill's eventual rebound. So if I use the word delusion in terms of Bill's ideal state, that's really what I'm talking about, those delusions that sit just to the left and right of it. So every time he eats a quote unquote healthy meal, he prevents himself from being able to experience that meal as is, telling himself a story that it's awful and that his other foods would make him feel better and that he's doing it all for future Bill. What this can also do is empower a notion that we have found the place of safety on the horizon. And what we tend to do is we have this mental map in our minds, and we're always trying to figure out where safety is, right? We're desperate to find where are we going to be okay? Where do we get the things we want, the things we think we need to let us be okay, to be loved, to be enough, to be worthy, to be attractive. And when we find a point on the horizon that looks just enough like safety, and we get convinced that, oh, that's it, I just got to get X, with the unspoken part being in order to get love, safety, acceptance, money, status, sex, whatever. We tend to draw a straight line between where we are now and where that thing is on the horizon, and we plot that as our course. That's the course. And so now we've given ourselves a straight line that, okay, I got to work out every day. I got to eat these meals, and then I'm going to get there, and it's all going to be worth it. And what this does is it raises the stakes so that anything along the way that forces you to deviate or slip is that much more disappointing, because I'm giving up so much, I'm sacrificing so much, and it's not working. This is why people freak out by getting on the scale. This is a big reason behind many of our overcompensations, are resorting to extremes, extreme calorie deficits, extreme exercise. Why? Because when you set all these things up in your mind, it's easy to fall into extreme panic that you've wasted all this suffering for nothing. And it leaves you more likely to make the exact decisions that are going to make all that suffering achieve nothing and end up in burnout and a backslide. And when we are moving forward, this straight line path forces us to plow through unnecessary difficulties and even harm ourselves for the sake of staying in this straight line. And it deepens the notion that safety and love lay in that imagined state rather than in the present moment. This is a metric ton of work, and it is designed bottom up, stem to stern, to fail. In the last episode, we talked about the role of shame. I said shame is not you feeling bad about your bad eating behaviors. It's the blinder. It's the voice saying you're not allowed to look at the man behind the curtain. You're not allowed to see this because it's so awful. Well, if it's so awful, why did you get me to do it? And of course, we don't think that shame wants us to do these things. But I made the argument that shame is a vital part of the apparatus that keeps us glued to these things. Why? Because it keeps us from looking behind the curtain. It keeps us from examining the behavior that we know is at some level illogical. And shame is the blinder that keeps us from being able to see the falsehoods for what they are and letting the truth dissolve these constructs so that we can live in a healthier way, an easier way. Shame does something else. It points to solutions that are extreme in nature. It points you toward these punishing, self-effacing pathways for change because they don't work. They will destroy your hope and your desire to ever try again. Once you get burned bad enough, this will finally keep you from acting in accordance with your deeper desires. Why? Why does shame have such a vested interest in us not seeing the truth of what we are and what we're capable of? Because shame works for the survival mechanism, and the survival mechanism believes fundamentally that safety lies in the status quo. And there's a survivor's bias that always allows the survival mechanism to feel like it is correct. Because, hey, I stopped you from doing that thing, and look, we didn't die, so I was right. So another angle we need to look at is, imagine if your car one day became sentient and spoke to you and said, I don't want gas. Don't put gas in me. I want dish soap. Put 16 gallons of dish soap in me. I like dish soap better. Would you go, okay, and then do that for 20 years and never enjoy a functioning car and then think, I'd really love to have a car that works. So how can I get my car to delay its gratification for having soap being put in its gas tank instead of gasoline, and somehow trick it into taking in gasoline so that it will actually run properly? Should your car become sentient and start asking for dish soap, you'll say no, because then you won't work right. Cars don't run on dish soap, cars run on gasoline. You wouldn't entertain this construct for very long without thinking, hold up, where did you get it in your head that dish soap is better than gasoline? And this is the angle with quote unquote unhealthy eating behaviors that we never seem to take. We never look at unhealthy behaviors as an apparatus that had to be built in order to get us off of what keeps us healthiest and happiest. Now, for some people, this apparatus was built in their childhood. For other people, it was built in the context of a culture that doesn't want to look at a lot of its behaviors, right? So there's no shame in how we individually get to this place. But it's just to say that, point being, we spend a lot of time trying to create apparatuses that steer this other apparatus toward normalcy, toward balance. It's like looking out the window of a plane and seeing that there's an elephant on the wing, and someone's like, quick, put an elephant on the other wing to balance this thing out. And that's what, as a culture, we tend to do. And no one ever thinks, what if we just unhooked the elephant from the wing. It's like, oh, you can do that? Well, yeah, you can. And that's actually the way to approach changes in your eating. You can't take for granted that this is our set point, that this is truly what we want. It's part of this puritanical streak in our society that believes each individual is fundamentally evil and sinful and slothful, and that they will always choose sin over virtue, lasciviousness over character, laziness over hard work. In the last episode, we talked about how in many human beings, whether it started as children or young adults or fully formed adults, eating is a very common way that we seek to express individuality and build a sense of autonomy in the face of indignity, in the face of that which would impede our sense of self, impede our sense of personal freedom and ability to make decisions on our terms. So, for instance, let's say that a whole society was hell-bent on telling people to be healthy, but always did it in the most critical, shameful, and stupid way possible. And so you think, well, then someone who's already been brought up in a society where we see bad habits as a depth that people fall into, right? Rather than an apparatus that had to be built to get a rational, sentient being to work against its own best interests. So if Bill wants to change his eating habits, he's going to do so on top of an apparatus or more than one apparatus that is keeping him deviated from the set point of a rational, sentient being that looks after its own benefit, both in the short term and the long term. And now, in order to look after his long-term health, he thinks that, oh, I must trade short-term happiness in order to get long-term health. And so Bill starts to eat broccoli. He doesn't like it, and he doesn't want to do it, but he does it out of desperation, a fear of dying young, a fear of his diabetes getting complicated and losing a foot, or losing his eyesight, or other, terrible health outcomes, heart disease, the whole nine yards. So now he's trying to employ a habit in a context of fear, really motivating himself by a future he'd like to avoid rather than a future that he truly wants. So yes, Bill is imagining a 180-pound Bill out there somewhere, but he's imagining it thinking, A, that represents love, safety, belonging, status, when he actually has full access to those things now, and linking his well-being to that image because he has deemed his present circumstance perilous and unsafe and a place of lacking worth and status. So Bill is firmly relating to these health changes from the point of view of an employee who is trading work for money, trading giving a boss an outcome in order to get paid. But in his case, he's setting it up in such a way that he doesn't get paid until the outcome is there. But every day that Bill sits down to eat food that he doesn't want to eat, to avoid a future that he doesn't want, with the delusion that he's pursuing his ideal future, Bill is giving, and getting nothing in return. There's nothing in it for Bill. And you might be saying, well, he's trying to avoid dying. True, but in this moment, Bill is alive. So not dying is not an actual benefit to Bill in this moment. It's not an improvement on his current state because he's already not dead. I know this may sound really crazy, but if you think about it, it starts to make more sense. What is in it? Where's the gratification for Bill? Where's the incentive for Bill? Where's the paycheck that's going to get him to show up like a good employee? When you get a human being into a place where they have no option but to do stuff they don't want to do just for fear of not dying or not having some catastrophic outcome, this is not a place of deep dignity. This is putting a gun to someone's head and saying, dig a hole. Does this process increase this person's sense of self, identity, sense of autonomy? No, that's not really historically what happens when you put someone in prison and put them on a chain gang. You're not doing that to increase their sense of autonomy and self-worth. You're doing it to decrease it. You're chipping away at their sense of dignity. In the case of many, penal systems, you're actively trying to degrade the self, operating on a philosophical assumption based in sinfulness that we must break down the sinful creature in order to rebuild a sinless creature. We must kill the old self in order for there to be new birth. And so, in so many circumstances, we approach healthier living with a big old banner that says, I'm here to make healthy choices and finally be good to myself. But the way we construct it, the way we think about it, the way we set it up, the way we categorize victory and defeat, the way we drive and propel, every aspect down to the tiniest habit at the core of this bigger change is set up to degrade well-being, to trade dignity in the moment for a lack of a catastrophic outcome, to trade well-being in the moment for the lack of a catastrophic outcome. And every chop at the tree of your dignity erodes your self-esteem, the very self-esteem that is there to uphold a version of you that is balanced and strong and self-interested enough to do smart things, like eat healthy food that makes you feel good, put gas in the car instead of dish soap so that the car runs well and isn't always being taken into the shop for costly repairs. In so many ways, the concept of delayed gratification actually accomplishes the opposite of what it purports to do, which is to trade short-term benefits for long-term benefits. And actually, what it causes us to do is trade short-term indignity for long-term indignity, trade a short-term lack of well-being for a long-term lack of well-being. And with setups like this, we give and give and give, and then we wonder why it all blows up, and we go careening back to wherever we started from. Why? Because the entire process was an imposition far more than a road out of hell. It's a road deeper into hell, and that's why we go running back to the outer circle of hell down the same path we came from as fast as possible. And this escape fuels the notion that we're escaping from healthy food or exercise when we're actually escaping from indignity, a lack of identity, an attack on our autonomy and our sense of self. And for many people, this attack on your autonomy matches the same attacks on your autonomy that happened in childhood that forced you to seek out a sense of self-preservation in food to begin with. There's so much talk about food addiction as if there's some chemical in food that's going to keep us addicted to food. People point out, well, your brain gives off all these good chemicals when you eat food. Okay, your brain also gets those chemicals from 1,000 other things. Why are we so fixed to food? Why do we choose food? Well, it's ease of access. It's fairly obvious too, because food represents life. But our society teaches people to live in these environments of a lack of love, a lack of belonging, a lack of acceptance, and then wonders why we act in desperation for those things, reaching for delusional second best options that are innately harmful. It's like not letting someone have access to water or permission to drink water, and then wondering why they eventually go so insane that they drink seawater. And then someone will say, these people, they're just addicted to salt. They just need to put the salt water down. And it's like, thanks. That's really helpful. You deserve to put gasoline in your car. You deserve to put good food in your body. Broccoli is not a human rights violation. Broccoli is a human right. You don't have to eat healthy. You get to eat healthy. All the voices in your head telling you have to eat crap and you're not allowed to eat healthy food. Oh, well, that's not going to taste good. Tell that to most of the cuisine in the world, right? Yes, there's a fried, unhealthy version of just about everything. Oh, well, it's too expensive to eat healthy. Oh, so only expensive food is delicious? Then tell me why almost every cuisine is based on the peasant food culture of that region. Look at barbecue, a uniquely American invention. Who doesn't love barbecue, right? If you ask people their favorite styles of food, it's going to be up there, right? What other styles? Mexican food, Italian food, right? Italian peasants who came over on boats, penniless. This is the food that we mean when we say Italian food. We're talking about Southern Italian food, the most economically, historically, and today, the most economically impoverished, disadvantaged region of Italy. When we talk about Mexican food, you mean the 100 million people just swimming in cash down there in Mexico? That's where this delicious cuisine comes from. No, it comes from thousands of years of culinary tradition, working with simple ingredients, lovingly prepared with technique. In the case of European Jews, who, in context of persecution, learned to make the most out of a very gristly, tough piece of meat, the brisket. Likewise, back in the bad old days, slaves were given the worst cuts of meat and they were just expected to figure it out. And they did. And this is the origination of barbecue culture. How do you make rib meat, which is, you can't get to it? There's no steaks to cut off the rib meat. Rib meat, brisket, these are the cuts of meat that rich people didn't want. Korean short ribs. Have you ever seen a short rib? Have you ever just put a short rib in the oven or put it on a pan and cook it? It tastes awful. It's like eating a shoe. But you braise a short rib for hours and you have one of the most delectable things on this green earth. Anthony Bourdain was really good at pointing this out. So many of our most amazing flavor profiles come in the form of peasant foods that were crafted not with expensive ingredients, but with a little bit of technique and innovation, which was spurred on by the context of lack. We tend to think of cuisine as this super fancy, super decadent thing. But so many forms of cuisine, yeah, sometimes they're using fattier cuts of meat that aren't really practical to use in a dieting situation when you're trying to lose weight. Fair enough, right? Not a lot of effective weight loss plans include a lot of brisket. Fair enough. However, there are less sought after cuts of meat that are getting more and more popular, right? The London broil, that's a top round, right? That's a very misunderstood cut of meat. It doesn't braise well like a short rib or a brisket does because it is so lean and there's very little connective tissue to break down. You can't put it on a grill and you can't put it in a crock pot and expect really good results. It's just going to get tough. But if you broil it really quickly and you're lucky to get a decent cut of meat, it's kind of like a cross between roast beef and steak if you get good at it. I'm not here to convince you that healthy food can taste good. Maybe you deserve to be convinced of that. And maybe we can do that on another occasion. But here, I just want to point out that you deserve to eat food that actually nourishes your body, that provides calories, yes, but even in a caloric deficit, could provide you all the daily nutrients and vitamins and minerals that your body needs to run well so that you get good sleep, so that you have healthy hair and skin and nails, so that you have a solid bowel movement for once in your life, so that you have the energy to work out, so that you have the recovery capability to work out one day and then be able to work out again the next day and feel great, so that you can lose weight, so that you can avoid diabetes or get rid of it. Have that long life, not being crippled by your weight or diseases of overconsumption like heart disease, diabetes, metabolic issues. To kind of conclude all this stuff, which I don't know, in the moment, this always feels like so. I always end every single recording, whether it's a video or a podcast. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this was so scattered. It was probably completely unintelligible. And then I start editing and I'm like, oh, not bad. Oh. And then by the end, I'm like super stoked for people to listen to it. Still, I hope that that's the case here, but I guess we'll find out. But I'll try to conclude in a way that wraps this up in a very practical way, right? Because you want to know at the end of all this, okay, John, you've made a lot of points about why this isn't a helpful way of thinking about behavior change and actually deepens some of our most unhealthy thought patterns. But I still don't know how to do healthy things that I don't currently like to do. Number one, forget about your idealized future. Stop spending energy holding up an idealized future and trying to use that to motivate your behavior today. Motivate your behavior today based in your values. Do you value your body feeling good, having healthy hair, skin, and nails? All those things that I mentioned before. Do you value feeling good? Because if you really value feeling good, you have to be honest. Do you feel better eating like shit? No, no one does. That's why we call it eating like shit. If we all felt better and performed better eating nothing but cereal and fried chicken, then that would be the recommended daily diet because it's highly palatable. In the case of cereal, it's fairly cheap, but no, that's not recommended. And we all know why. If you ask yourself to go to work for you, you need to be willing to give support at a commensurate level with the expectations, with what you're asking for. If you're saying, hey, I want you to eat differently, you can't just make demands on yourself. You got the fear bossing you around. And so now you're the middle management bossing your behaviors around saying, you got to do this thing so my boss doesn't get mad at me. And you're just letting the fear roll downhill into how you talk to yourself and how you make your decisions, pursuing your own health. And at that point, are you pursuing your own health or are you just running from fear under the guise of pursuing health? This is why so many people, their doctors tell them not to smoke. And they know all the bad health outcomes that smoking can cause. But the more they hear about it, the more it keeps them stuck with that coping mechanism. Why? Because they continue to be stuck in a context of fear. And you don't get rid of a bad habit in a context of pressure and fear. You get rid of a bad habit by establishing balance and peace to the point where your mind realizes, oh, I don't need this thing to get the things that I thought it was giving me, even though it wasn't. Does that make sense? I don't know if that sentence was grammatically correct. We don't want to dissociate when we're enjoying this nice meal, this healthy meal. We want to actually be more present here where we weigh 350 pounds, where we weigh 600 pounds. Why? Because here is where you're actually sensing and tasting and eating the food that's in front of you. You don't have a shot at learning what healthy food even tastes like if you're not here. And if you can't learn what it tastes like, how could you ever come to change your tastes? Have you ever changed your tastes before? Is it possible? Of course it's possible. Have you ever gone from not liking a thing and then you start to like it? Ever see a TV show and everyone's talking about it and you're like, ugh, I'm not going to watch that. Oh, I'm not going to be one of these nerds talking about Game of Thrones. Or I'm not going to be one of these nerds who watches this crappy reality TV show. I would never. And then a friend gets you to watch it. And then all of a sudden you're kind of hooked. Somebody gives you a taste and all of a sudden, and you're like, oh, that's not so bad. And you start to see it in a different light. And yeah, it doesn't taste like that other TV show that you used to really, really like, but maybe it tastes different and you like it for different reasons. It doesn't have to be either or. You don't have to like fried chicken and cereal or like healthy food. You can like all of the foods. And when you like all of the foods, this might be terrifying for some people because, well, then how do I know which things to hate and which ones are bad and which ones are good? How do I draw the nice and neat black and white lines in my reality so that I can be safe? That is a product of your conditioning. The need to mark everything as either good or bad. When in reality, you don't need to live in a world where certain foods are evil and certain foods are the salvation. You don't need to live in a world where one type of dinner makes you a good person and one type of dinner makes you a bad person. If you sit down and have fried chicken and cereal for dinner, that means that you're not on the path of safety, that you're on a path straight to doom, then that's how your brain can get you to give up and cash the whole thing in and throw it in the trash. So before you go asking, how do I get myself to eat this healthy food that I don't want to eat? Maybe ask yourself, why do I not want to eat healthy food? Because maybe there's a feeling there that we're uncomfortable seeing. And then we get right back to the last episode's conversation. What is so truly horrifying about eating some rice and a London broil with a nice salad instead of eating fried chicken and cereal? I can tell you, I've lived both ways. Tonight, I know what I'm going to eat because I can make a healthy dinner taste really good. With a little bit of practice, you can too. And then you feel good on top of it. This doesn't have to be hard. This path The healthy way does not have to be the hard way. Everything in fitness culture is bullshit. If you haven't figured it out already, part of the reason you haven't succeeded is because nobody's ever taught you to succeed. They've taught you over and over and over again new ways to fail or new ways to keep doing the same old failed techniques. Eating healthier can be easy. I'm never going to teach you how to delay gratification. I'm going to teach you how to find gratification in places where you're currently not allowing yourself to have it, you're currently not able to see it, or where you're not able to access it because you're not accepting the reality in which it resides. You are always going to eat what you want. So instead of trying to force yourself to want things that you don't want, maybe ask yourself why you don't want good things and why you want harmful things. And if you're really honest with yourself, that conversation is going to lead to some very illuminating places. Does it happen overnight? No. But does it ultimately lead you to a more balanced, fully present, fully unified version of yourself? Where it's not like you're this huge factory and you're the owner and the boss and the middle manager and the workers and everyone's yelling at each other and everyone hates each other and there's just all this resentment and there's this power struggle and there's sabotage. No, you don't want that. You want to wake up in the morning and be like, oh, I want to do good things so that I feel good, so that I get good things, so that I can do more good things, so that I can feel good. And everything can just be as easy as it can be. It doesn't mean that there aren't hard days or that there aren't days where you can buckle down and do something that doesn't feel amazing, right? We all know that those days happen and it's perfectly fine to push through here and there. Why? Because it's not wrong to trade momentary discomfort for the greater good. But when you're doing it for you, when you're doing it in accordance with your values, even those moments where you're trading a little bit of pain for forward motion, those can be fulfilling. Think about it. If you've ever enjoyed a really hard workout where muscles are burning and you're out of breath, but you're just loving it, when you encounter certain, rough places in the path, you can enjoy it in the same way. Why? You can't enjoy a workout that anybody's forcing you to do like that. That's going to feel like absolute torture. You can only enjoy discomfort when you're choosing it fully because you know it reflects something deeper and more true about yourself than some outcome that you're trying to run from. As always, I hope that this was coherent and useful in some way. But if you do have questions or, something wasn't clear, you can always ask me. We will have a discussion thread in the Facebook group. For the last episode, we only got 2 people to comment on the discussion thread. It'd be nice to get a more lively conversation going this time around. Maybe a question for the discussion thread would be, in setting up your current diet or exercise plan, are you choosing exercises or foods that you don't actually like because you're so stuck in this mode of thinking that healthy things have to be undesirable? And if you had opened up to a little bit more creativity and give yourself a little bit more permission, are there things that you like that overlap with the things you're trying to accomplish in life right now? Given my work with clients, I think that you'd be surprised at how much that's possible. If you'd like to work with me one-on-one, I am still open I think I have 1 spot left to fill for August. I'm going to be forming a committee of sorts, basically interested people who want more community, more fellowship, but also want results, something that we might call community-driven results. Then let's start a thread about that in the Facebook group and let's put our collective heads together and figure out a way to help more people. And if you're not in the Facebook group already, go check that out. It's called Lose Weight with John. Please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Feel free to watch the video form of this podcast over there. Share this episode with a friend who you think could use it or could use some of the other episodes and topics that we've covered. And if you have specific questions for how to deal with certain things in life that feel stuck, send them my way. You can email me, john@oaksweightloss.com. That's JOHN and Oaks with an E. And you can email that same address if you're interested in one-on-one coaching. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.